Hello? Maybe I should turn on my tracking. Give me a moment. Okay, so. Oh, hello! Ugh. I saw a game. I was looking at it today. It's called Citizen Sleeper. Looks interesting. Unhello! You leaving, Proxy? Why are you leaving? Yeah, has anyone heard of Citizen Sleeper? I was like looking for games that like you throw dice. And Citizen Sleeper. Looks fun. Like looking into random games, RPGs. I don't know what you would call it. Excuse me. So allergies have been pretty consistent during this season, and it sucks a lot. Hey Nibby. So sorry if streams are short. That'll be probably the case until I don't know my allergies die down. Yeah, but that didn't involve going to Florida. And to be completely honest, I don't want to go to the States. I'm happy where I am. Not all too happy right now. Let's dice. Oh, actually, there is a game I want to show you guys. It's currently still just like an in concept game that's being developed. Find it. The entire concept stems from ants. So, okay. There we go. So you know how ants work off of pheromone trails? I have no idea what section I'm going to use for this game because it's not actually, hasn't really got a name yet. But the entire concept, I remember finding it on YouTube, is you do this. You draw a pheromone trail. And then you press play. Hey look, ants. The entire concept is based around, like, ants. The ant people.
Attention please. Attention please. The building's fire alarm system is about to be tested. Please disregard all tones. No action is required. I repeat, the building's fire alarm system is about to be tested. Please disregard all tones. No action is required.
Okay, it's still going.
Warning. Stand by for further instructions.
Alright. I'm just gonna have to waiting for this to finish. Okay, I think we're good. And then I have to wait for the guy to be like, okay, it's done.
Attention please. Testing of the building's fire alarm system is now complete. Please respond normally to any future alarms. I repeat, testing is now complete. Thank you.
Alright. We're good, I think. Fuck me. Alright. So, ants. Where was I? Ants. I always thought ants were, like, really fucking neat. The way they do their stuff. So if I, like, put ant here and make him gather all this wood. And then put, like, a wood hut on the way. And then press play. They're gonna gather all of the leaves and whatnot. And then turn it into wood. Also, there's other insects that will attack your kingdom. It's really neat. Reminds me of the old game Sim Ant. I never actually got to play Sim Ant. Hey, Pizza Man. I wish I had, like, a thing to actually showcase or, like, talk about this game. There's a well... Current fads in retro game community? What's that? What's the current fad? What's the current fad? I'd like to actually explore old games at some point. Playing Sim Tower and role-playing as Donald Trump. Why? Of all people! I thought this was such a cute concept. It's currently free. I need to find the link so I can tell you guys about it. Let's see. Alt tab. So this is the channel that I found it on. I found it on YouTube. And it's an ant game prototype. So if anyone's interested in trying this out for themselves. And now look, I've got like tiny little archers. Look how cute that is. And it's just ant people. Resource? Got nectar? Yeah, and they collect stuff. There's like... I remember the dev talking about... The dev was talking about, what's it called? Trying to incorporate features from like leafcutter ants and to make food. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. Epic Game Store is giving away Empyrean. I always wanted to try it. What the fuck is Empyrean? This week I tasted both products made by the partnership from Oreo and Coca-Cola, and I think it tastes weird. My partner ate the Oreo and Coke flavored Oreo. I took a whiff of that and I was like, nope, I know exactly how this is going to taste and I'm not interested. Look at them shoot the arrows. What'd it smell like? Oreo and Coke mixed together. Open world space survival game. Huh. Coke flavored Oreo and Oreo flavored Coke. Alright. It's a survival sandbox. No shortage of those. But the part that actually intrigues me is the settlement part. I'm not really interested in building a ship, though. Hmm. It is free. Was that tomorrow? The only reason I keep Epic Games around is before they're free games. Hmm. Not really in a shortage of survival games I want to play, though. I think that's what we all do. Yeah. Okay. This week has not been treating me good. Ugh. This is how I know spring is in full force. When allergies are fucking destroying me on a daily basis. Okay, so... and then I make a tiny little house. Make him do that. Hey, Dip! Where's the link? I'm gonna, like, pin this here. Temporarily. In a while, have you been? Has it been that long? It's spring, so allergies. That's how I've been. I've been kind of getting destroyed by my allergies. Look at then you can make luxury items, and then you can tell them to deliver it to each of these little houses. And when they have luxury items, they upgrade. Yeah, it's rough. It is what it is. Okay, so now I can make... beer. Your sub ran out? So this entire game, this You resub tomorrow. That's okay. I appreciate people for just being here. So this game, once it's actually fully fleshed out, is gonna be a really fun game. I love the idea of using pheromone trails, ant pheromone trails, I suppose. It's really cute. Yeah, it's like an ant city builder. It's currently a prototype. It's gone through a couple of different iterations, and there's a channel on YouTube. I'm gonna bring it up. I'm gonna show you. I want to show you guys. Excuse me. I think it's really cool.
As a colony.
I'm gonna close this game for now. Settings. Put to desktop.
Of ant people, creatures that are half ant and half people. And
ant
over
people.
The past few videos, I've been adding a bunch of different kinds of ant behavior, like pheromone trails and swarming and devouring resources for the good of the colony. And I've also been adding some human-like behavior, like archery or even crafting beer and clothing. And now I've finally brought together enough of this stuff to make a playable prototype. And there is a download link on the game's itch page linked in the description. But more about that later. I want to show you what these ants can do and how you control them, and also some of the new stuff I've added. It all starts with a building, like this castle. And by clicking and dragging the building, I can draw a pheromone trail. This trail will tell the ants what to do, so I can, for example, send them out to collect some resources.
It's so neat just watching them do stuff.
They'll bring these resources back to the castle and cache them in. And you can spend this cash at nighttime to place new building types. And by adding these buildings to your pheromone trails, you can change the behavior of your ants. For example, by building more houses, I can get more ants, and then I can direct them with more trails. And if I add this wood hut to a trail, then the ants will start delivering nearby plants to the wood hut, where it gets turned into wood.
Ugh, my allergies. You know, Games Workshop, can we make a game that's based...
And then if I connect this archery...
that's based on the biology of orcs, and where we literally start off as mushroom spores? Make it like Spore, but not quite. Can we? Okay, start as mushrooms, alright. And it goes through the process of orc biology until it actually fully becomes just an orc RTS game. So hear me out, okay? The concept goes like this. You have the fungus, the mushrooms grow, then you get the squigs, alright? Then you get the snotlings. Snotlings, okay? That's the part. The main meat of the game is being the snotlings. And then the Gretchen show up eventually. So you're slowly advancing up the orc quote-unquote tech tree until you get to the orc boys. And you'll end up with one orc that's bigger than the rest. He the boss. So basically it's just the start of a new orc colony? I don't know what the fuck word to... Warband? A new warband. There you go. And you can actually influence what type of orc it becomes. Like what type of orc warband it becomes. Wouldn't that be such a fun idea? And you're just on like random planets and you can interact and like attack all the different kinds. It would be so fucking cool. But that's not gonna happen. Games Workshop ain't gonna make that game. I'd play the shit out of that.
Range as well, then they'll take the wood and supply it to the archer ants. They need a constant supply of wood in order to make their arrows.
This game is so cute.
And the archery range has a trail as well, and I can use it to march my archer ants all up and down the colony to defend it from threats.
This game has so much potential.
You can redraw these pheromone trails at any time if you feel like you want to change your ant behavior. And you can also see how the changes you make to the trail will affect your ant behavior by looking at these little icons. They represent the ants picking up and transporting resources of all different types.
I love how the archer ants have like little hats.
Any nearby clay into pots. And you can see here in the building's info that pots are marked as a luxury resource. This means that I can deliver them to my ant houses.
This game. I saw this once and I'm just like, oh.
Every time they get a new luxury resource, their building will level up. I made a whole bunch of different graphics
Look at that!
to show each of the levels that you can get. In the demo, you can't get your buildings all the way up to level 10 just yet because there aren't 10 different kinds of luxury resource, but the idea is to show how your ant society is evolving and leveling up as you collect more luxuries.
Yeah, it's pin. Look at the pinned link.
The Pharaoh games from the 1990s where you'd have these little huts and then you bring them pots and water and eventually medicine and music and all this sort of stuff, and they would level up to become wealthier citizens. I wanted to bring some of that into the game. And the reason why you want to do this is because each time
I want to keep an eye on this, because when this becomes a full game, it's going to be so good.
Culture points, and culture points are how you win the game, how you beat the level, at least for now. On the flip side, if your castle building gets destroyed, this is where your queen ant is living, and so if it's destroyed, you will lose the game. And every day a new wave of enemy bugs will come to attack you, so be sure to build enough defenses. Anyway,
could even make this a roguelike, just for kicks.
All of that stuff is in the latest prototype. I started work on this ant colony concept about 7 months ago, so I'm relatively happy with the progress I've made so far, but there's still a whole lot to do. There's so many different ways that this game could be expanded. I have loads of plans and ideas, and I'm constantly receiving even more cool ideas from all of you. And I really want to try and do the game justice in the time that I have.
You know how much work it is to add multiplayer to a game?
It's going to fall into 3 main branches. The first, and the biggest, is adding new content. So that means I want to add new industries to the game, like beekeeping or aphid farming. Maybe there are some building types that help you wrangle these creatures and feed them and take care of them to improve their yields. And maybe you also have to keep them safe too, I don't know. I might also add something inspired by leaf cutter ants, which chop leaves and then bring them to the colony to be farmed into fungus.
You know how fucking cool leaf cutter ants are? Have I told you guys? Have I, like, I don't know what my obsession is with leaf cutter ants, but I think it's so fucking cool that like an entire colony of ants will go out there and fucking just strip, like like areas with leaf cutter ants just get stripped of fucking greenery. Like leaves, just get stripped of leaves, and you know what they do with the leaves? They like chew it up and then they add it to like, and then they cultivate, they farm fungus! These ants farm! Ants are so fucking neat. I've always loved ants. I don't know why.
They then eat.
Yeah, leafcutter ants can farm. They farm.
I also want to add new hazards to the game, like more enemy types with a variety of.
Ants also fucking have livestock. You know ants take care of aphids, right? Like, they protect aphids and actually protect them because the aphids do whatever they do. But, yeah. If you wore green, I would strip it off too. Well, guess I have to wear green.
Abilities. I really want to
Alright,
take
proxy.
some inspiration from the Pikmin series and have weird enemies like frogs that can belly flop or anteaters that sort of slurp up your ants, stuff like that. And of course, obstacles don't have to all be enemies. Some of them could be water or swampy terrain. There's a lot of possibility.
There's so much
but this
potential
whole
and
branch is
possibilities
going to be
for
the
it.
biggest chunk of work I have to do, so I need to make sure that I'm prioritizing things properly. Branch
Fuck
number
next stream,
2
we just do it
is
now.
level design. We need to add a variety of different levels to the game that each contain different resources.
I love
and
ants.
hazards.
There's so much, so
And therefore,
interesting.
Each level will push you to develop your colony in a different way each time. I also want the levels to have a degree of randomness in them to help keep the game fresh. And perhaps there could even be multiple different species of ants in the game, with different species being more suited to different levels. I think that could add loads of replayability, because you keep coming back to old levels with new strategies. But it's also a really big feature, so I need to be a bit wary here of too much scope creep. And branch number 3 is
Feature creep.
refinement.
Death of a lot of
Overall, I
indie
think
games.
The gameplay is looking really good right now. The pheromone trails are a unique and fun way to direct your ant behavior. They give you a fair bit of control without being too micromanagey. I'm pretty happy with them. But there's still a certain level of fiddliness that could be improved or removed with some simple tweaks. And I'm sure there's a bunch of other refinements I can make as well. You know, I'm super open to criticism as always and feedback. If you have any ideas to improve the game, do let me know. And over the next year, I'm going to be working hard on all 3 of these pillars, trying to take the game from where it is now.
Okay, so let me show you something.
What you are looking at right now is an ant mill, also commonly known as a death spiral. So how did they get into this situation? It all started with this ant. Army ants are practically blind and rely on each other's pheromones to navigate. When army ants misinterpret the scent trails left by other ants and break from the crowd, the phenomenon of the ant mill will be observed. If enough ants join, they can form massive death spirals. The creatures are then unable to break free, owing to their lack of sight, and march around in a loop until they eventually die of exhaustion. Good to know, right?
Did you know they did this? That because of the way ants work, that sometimes they can end up in a spiral? Alright.
We domesticated cows 6,000 years ago, but these tiny farm animals have been kept for far longer. As
They
the
started
aphids
farming
suck
before humans
sap,
did.
They create sugary produce for their equally diminutive farmers. The ants milk their herds by stroking them with their antennae. The sweet secretion is known as honeydew. Like human farmers, the ants even move their livestock to richer pastures to increase production.
Yeah, they just pick up the aphids and
They
move them
also
somewhere else.
protect their herds.
Ladybugs eat
On this
aphids.
scale, a ladybird is more dangerous than a wolf. But
Later,
if the
Dip.
many herdsmen work together, the cattle raider hasn't a chance.
Yeah, look, they even fucking protect the aphids. It's so cool. And what else is there? There's leafcutter ants. This one, here we go.
If you visit the tropical forests of Central and South America, you might be lucky enough to spot a parade of leafcutter ants, tirelessly carrying food back to their nests. But did you know that those ants aren't taking those leaf cuttings home to eat? Because I did not know that. The fact is, they physically can't survive on plant material. Instead, the ants use those leaves to feed the gardens of fungi that they grow in their colonies, which are their primary source of food. And both the age and the sophistication of these little farms put our farms to shame. While we've been farming for around 10,000 to 12,000 years, the ancestors of these ants have been doing it for around 60 million years. And over that time, they've
60
been through many of
million
their own
years.
agricultural revolutions that have changed not just how they farm, but also the very biology of their fungi that they grow, and the biology of the ants themselves. So when and how and why did ants start farming? It looks like the relationship between ants and fungi may have emerged from the ashes of a famously devastating extinction event. Now, these ants didn't start out as fungus farmers. For much of their history, they did what most ants still do today. They go out into the world and eat the things that they find, which also is how I go through life. But everything changed for them when they started farming. And this transition happened only once in the subgroup known as the Atini, because they're teeny ants. That's not why they call them that, actually. There are more than 250 species of these ants, all of them in the Western Hemisphere, and all of them fungus farmers. But not all of these Attine ants farm the same way. Most practice what some researchers have called lower agriculture, the system with the least complex farms, which is thought to have been the first to evolve. In this system, the fungi aren't fully dependent on the ants. They're what are known as facultative symbionts. They can survive without the ants and interbreed with other wild fungi. So they're not really fully domesticated. And if they end up disappearing from the colony somehow, the ants can just replace them with wild versions of the cultivated fungi species. But other ants, including the leafcutters, practice higher agriculture. In these colonies, the fungi are obligate symbionts. They're completely dependent on their ant farmers. They can't survive in the wild, and they can't interbreed with free-living fungi. They've been fully domesticated by ants, which I think is strange. But just like with us, farming is even a part of the ants' culture, if you can call it that. Like when young queens of these ant species leave their families to start new colonies, they take a piece of the fungus with them to start their own gardens, passing these strains down from queen to queen across generations. So how did this relationship between ants and fungus actually start? And how did it evolve
it's
over time into
so
the different
fucking
agricultural
cool.
systems that we see today?
And then
the
they
fossil
feed the
record
leaves.
has only given us some pieces of the story.
The fungus.
Mainly because while we do have lots of fossils of ants, many trapped in amber, they can't easily tell us how those ants actually lived. But there is some extremely rare fossil evidence of fungus farming in ancient Attine ants, in the form of nests that contain traces of fungus filaments. But these are from relatively recently, like around 5 to 10 million years ago. This means that to dig deeper into the
Millions
origins
of years!
fungus farming in ants, we've had to find another way to study them. Enter the field of phylogenomics, or using genomic data to reconstruct an organism's evolutionary history. In a paper published in 2017, researchers at the Smithsonian tried to trace the history of fungus farming in ants across deep time, using their genomes. They compared the DNA of more than 100 different ant species from around the Western Hemisphere. Some that practiced higher agriculture, some that practiced lower agriculture, and some that didn't farm at all. By comparing their genetic relatedness and how long ago the different groups diverged from one another, based on the mutations that each lineage had accumulated, they could reconstruct their evolutionary
One of
family
the
tree.
most
And this
successful,
reveals some intriguing clues
insects
about
we have
where, when, and why
on the planet.
each agricultural
Ants.
system first evolved. The
Very
clues seem to
successful.
suggest that the Attini, which contains all of the fungus farming ant species, originally emerged in the rainforests of South America around 66 million years ago. And almost immediately,
There's also
they
big ones,
diversified really
bull
quickly,
ants,
radiating
there's
into many
bullet
species.
ants.
By 61 million years ago, they had established themselves as lower
Fire
agriculturists,
ants.
full-time
Do you know
fungus
fire
farmers.
ants can make a
And
raft?
This time period rings a bell
Out
with
of
the
themselves?
that. This was a direct aftermath of the KPG mass extinction, with the asteroid and the volcanism and the end of the reign of the dinosaurs, the non-avian dinosaurs anyway. And the fact that the origin of fungus farming in ants lines up with a period of global ecological chaos is probably not a coincidence. After all, the impact must have caused all kinds of environmental mayhem, including a sort of nuclear winter in which clouds of dust and ash blocked out sunlight. This would have been catastrophic for photosynthesizers like plants at the base of the food chain, and for species that relied on them. But fungi are decomposers, and they don't rely on sunlight for growth, so they might actually have thrived in these conditions. The dark, humid, post-KPG world, filled with dead and decaying organisms, would have been a paradise for fungi. The earliest Attine ants, on the other hand, would have had a much harder time. Suddenly, foraging for food would have been a real challenge, at least above ground. So it's easy to imagine why Attine ants might have begun harnessing fungi as their sole food source. It's a stable and reliable crop that could grow underground, perfectly suited to the apocalypse. And this changed not just their lifestyle, but elements of their biology too. research has shown that attine ants lost the ability to produce an important amino acid called arginine very early on in their evolution. And ever since then, they've been totally reliant on fungi to get that amino acid. This may explain why we have yet to find a single example of an attine ant species that stopped farming. They literally can't survive without their crops. So while the evidence is kind of circumstantial, it's at least plausible that the devastation of the KPG was the catalyst for the first agricultural revolution in attine ants, transitioning from foragers to farmers. But it wasn't until 30 million years later that one group of ants experienced their second agricultural revolution, transitioning from lower to higher agriculture. The researchers found the genetic signal of this transition at somewhere between 27 million to 31 million years ago in the early Oligocene epoch.
66
meow! A group of ants that practice higher agriculture seems to have emerged and branched off from the other
It's a
attines.
million
And
years
just like the
ago,
ants'
but
first
just the way they
agricultural
write it
revolution,
down.
the time
Meow!
of this one matched up with a period of environmental upheaval. This was the aftermath of the terminal Eocene event that took place, as the name suggests, at the end of the Eocene epoch, around 34 million years ago. For reasons we don't fully understand, the planet went through a period of global cooling at this time, which allowed drier, less humid habitats to expand. And some attine ants left the rainforests of South America for these drier habitats and brought their fungi with them, which may have spurred a radical shift in their relationship. After all, dry habitats are pretty inhospitable to fungi. So researchers think that in these new environments, the fungi became completely dependent on the ants for survival. They couldn't live outside of the well-tended, humid underground gardens of the ant colony. And over time, they became reproductively isolated from their free-living relatives, which had largely remained in the rainforests. This marked the switch from facultative to obligate symbiosis in the fungi, and from lower to higher agriculture in the ants. These fungi are now found only in higher attine ant colonies, and they've developed some specific adaptations in this fully domesticated existence. For example, they have nutrient-rich structures called gonglidia that can be efficiently harvested and eaten by the ants. These structures aren't seen in wild fungi or in lineages grown by ants that practice lower agriculture. And this relationship seems to have reached new heights in the leafcutter ants. This group is represented by around 50 species, which are widespread in South America, Central America, Mexico, and some southern parts of the US. And the researchers' analysis suggests that the leafcutters were the most recent group of higher agriculturalists to evolve, emerging around 18 to 19 million years ago. They have incredibly complex colonies with big fungal gardens and even sophisticated hygiene practices to protect their fungal crops from disease. Like there are certain areas of their nests where they leave their waste to keep it away from their gardens. And some ants even have bacteria on them that produce antimicrobial compounds, which help protect the fungus from pathogens.
Ants got better hygiene than most
And unlike
people!
other attines, which usually just collect whatever dead plant and animal material they can find, leafcutter ants source only the finest, freshest biomass, cutting it straight off the plant. Mwah. In fact, leafcutters go through so much plant material, they're considered the dominant herbivore of the neotropics, harvesting more total plant material than any other animal group. So in a way, the leafcutter ants have kind of brought fungus farming full circle. What may have started out as a way to survive without plants after the KPG mass extinction has now come all the way back around to depending on plants for the system to keep going. If the story of the attine ants tells us anything, is to never underestimate their ability to innovate over time. Through 60 million years of evolution, facing challenge after challenge in the form of global environmental change, the ants and their fungi adapted, adjusted, and thrived. If this got
The reign of the hell ants. There's so many different kinds of ants. So many different kinds of ants. And what's interesting to me is that there's people out there that take care of entire colonies. Like, instead of having a conventional pet, they have ant colonies. Or just bug colonies and whatnot. And I think it's really interesting because they consider them like the entire colony is their pet. And I was like, that's really fucking cool. So usually they're very knowledgeable in what the ants need to thrive. And I remember, I think it's called Ants Canada. There's a channel called Ants Canada that later, Pizza Man. There's a channel called Ants Canada that has a bunch of different insects. He has so fucking many. And he started doing this thing where he let some colonies meet. If that's a good way to say that. So he has like some colonies, what's it called? Clash with each other. I thought that was interesting. Say Ants Canada. Look at
What I'm doing here is completely legal, but scientifically difficult. This is my giant cloud rainforest floor vivarium I call Pandora, which is connected via this glass bridge to a whole other giant vivarium above, called Orcadia, simulating the rainforest's tree canopy. Together they form a
Dude,
tropical ecosystem
it's crazy.
involving a vast plethora of creatures, plants,
This
and one of
guy's
my
just got
personal favorites,
tiny ecosystems in
fungi.
his house.
And being the fun guy for fun guy that I am, I've been cooking up the ultimate plan. In the name of science, of course, a growing operation of epic proportions. There's a type of mushroom that is very special. They aren't quite psychedelic mushrooms, but there's an even more valuable mushroom species that I've been privately studying for years now that has been stumping scientists forever. Meet Termitomyces, a highly prized edible mushroom that we humans have been relishing for millennia, but have not yet been able to grow agriculturally, like most other edible mushrooms. To this day, if we want to eat these tasty, nutrient-dense, thought to be by many cultures medicinal mushrooms, we need to venture out and collect them when they sprout after a tropical
Hey,
rainstorm from the tops of termite mounds, hence their name. You see, the termites, belonging to the genus Macrotermes, that actively grow this fungus as a food source, possess the secret sauce and ancient knowledge to successfully cultivate the underground fungus combs that give rise to the Termitomyces mushrooms. The termite workers carefully calibrate complex architectural structures within their nests in response to temperature fluctuations that create the perfect microclimates for this highly prized fungus to thrive. I collected a comb from a termite mound in my yard a couple years back. But
Too
in
many
a
big
container
words.
like this, without the termites to tend to it, the fungus comb died in a day. For ages, scientists have been trying to understand how to mass grow these highly valuable mushrooms in a lab, but we still haven't quite figured it out. For years, I've been trying to grow these special termite shrooms by cultivating colonies of the fungus-growing termites themselves in various test setups. But year after year, I failed at every attempt, with the termite colonies and the fungus combs failing to survive. I came close 2 years ago, but at a certain point the fungus died out. I was missing a secret piece of the puzzle. But this time, I felt I finally had the missing piece. I have suspicions that one can't just isolate the termites in a sterile petri dish and try to get them to grow the mushrooms. My theory now
Why your
is
tits
that
sore?
you need an entire ecosystem to do it. And this year, I had the perfect simulation of a tropical forest in my home. So the chances to be the first in the world to grow Termitomyces mushrooms indoors were in our favor more than ever before. Ladies and gents, prepare to be mind-blown by a biological journey into this unseen dimension of the micro world and my Termitomyces mushroom growing operation using a colony of
Train for
termites
wrestling?
and an entire
Fair
rainforest ecosystem in my home to do it. Welcome to the Ants Canada Ant Channel.
Really fucking cool that he's trying to grow a mushroom that no one's been able to grow.
Enjoy. Fungi have been called the dark matter of terrestrial life. They seem to play critical roles throughout global ecosystems. But according to the World Agroforestry Center, we humans still know little about them. Though past fieldwork has yielded promising results, we continue to know little or even nothing about the vast majority of fungal species populating our planet, including the most mysterious of all, the Termitomyces mushroom. Our story begins here, when I spotted the most incredible sight. Wide-eyed, I marveled at the ever-elusive creatures of our rainforest, the great OG termites, whom we've only spotted a handful of times because they rarely show themselves, most especially during the day like this. This was certainly a rare occasion. These are Nasuti termes, a wood-eating species of termite that have been here since the start of this rainforest project, having been transported into here via the huge stump on which they were now constructing the most amazing tunnel. The workers were constructing this tunnel using their poop as a building material. So this tube they were building was a poop tube, a protective tunnel that once hardened would allow the colony members to travel to other areas of the stump undisturbed. There were many creatures in the rainforest that loved eating termites, so this poop tube needed to be built. But in order to do that, the workers had to be exposed for just a few hours, in which time special soldier termites with pointy guns on their heads, which can shoot out a nauseous defensive sticky fluid, stood guard among the worker lines. I was so happy to see the colony was still alive and thriving, even after 8 months since their transport here, which meant their king and queen, who also lived somewhere inside the stump, were healthy. I watched them build the tunnels over several hours.
These, termites, bees, not wasps, never wasps. Wasps are discs. Ants. They're so fucking interesting.
And soon, the tunnel had been completed. Now these Nasutotermes termites are not the species of termites that I needed to grow our Termitomyces mushrooms. These termites are a species that eat and nest in wood, and were smaller in size. The fungus-growing termites that I needed, known scientifically as Macrotermes gilvis, were introduced into Pandora about a month ago, when I threw in a whole bunch of queens and kings who were eager to pair up and cooperatively found new colonies underground.
That's how world
A
would
ton
crumble?
were eaten by the tree frogs, but some managed to survive and burrow into the soil. And ever since then, I've been waiting eagerly to see signs of the first workers emerging above ground to begin the intricate fungus growing process. Little did I know, the long wait was soon about to be over, and the fun was just about to begin. But meanwhile, I had some business to attend to regarding a certain new baby I spotted last week living in our rainforest. The new baby sunskink crawled out from a hole in the driftwood and began to wander. Until it slipped below a carpet of moss. It had been born from adult sunskinks, which used to live in the forest, but that I released back into the wild a few weeks back. Seeing this baby sunskink had confirmed my suspicions that they had been breeding, and I didn't know how many of these babies were actually living here. But it was just so cute. It measured about an inch long, such a tiny little guy, and was very active. It was hunting for little insects to feed on. Every time it disappeared below the moss carpet, I could track its whereabouts.
To be honest, I'm not feeling great.
The moss. Now, one thing
So I don't know if I'll
about
be
this
here
little one
when you return.
was that its tail had
Allergies
been
are
snipped.
destroying me.
It was then that I decided to call him Snip. These skinks are capable of dropping their tails in the face of a predator attempting to catch them. So perhaps this sunskink already had an altercation with one of the resident predators in the rainforest. Now my first instinct was to remove the little one from the rainforest and raise it in its own tank somewhere. But after some thought, I realized that keeping it inside the vivarium, where it would learn to hunt and evade predators, was essential to this sunskink's development if I did release it into the wild one day, just like I did its parents. I had no intention of keeping it forever as my personal pet, just another member of the rainforest that would eventually grow up to be a top predator and teach us about its place in the ecosystem. After basking on the driftwood for a while, Snip crawled and leaped away to hide somewhere below ground. But in total contrast to Snip, there was another member of the rainforest, a very controversial creature who had quite recently assumed Snip's parents' throne as top predator of our rainforest.
What is
whom
that?
I did have intentions of keeping as a pet. A tiny fly landed on Godzilla's snout, drinking its tears, which were full of valuable salts and minerals. But while the fly was feeding, I was feeding Godzilla and threw him a live roach, which he eventually took. Watching our resident baby Cayman eat was always so satisfying. Swallowing down an entire roach was quite the process for him, as it took several rounds of active management to work the roach into just the right position in his mouth to slide down his throat. Godzilla right now could only manage swallowing things the size of an adult roach at this age, which made me a bit nervous, seeing as now there were baby sunskinks running around the rainforest. But I later realized that if Godzilla did manage to catch them, I had to accept that this was all part of the ecosysteming.
That's a
But as
word.
he continued to work with the roach, I noticed something on his face. It was a scar. Do you see it? It was healing over now and appeared as a slight discoloration. Crocodilian skin is made up of specialized scales called osteoderms, which are bony scutes that help protect the croc from injury. But croc skin is very fast healing if it does get punctured. So where did this scar come from? I also wondered where. But the rainforest was full of places he could acquire nicks and scrapes from, like the sharp thorns on some of the plants, or perhaps a squabble with a crab while eating it, a bite from a huntsman, or a sharp rock. Now Godzilla here was captive bred.
I
and
like
was
how he
intended
had
to
a
be
warning.
pet caiman. However, instead of protecting him completely from the rainforest's dangers, he too needed to learn the ways of the rainforest, as he would eventually be moving outside to my 60-foot outdoor pond and sunken garden, where he would need to contend with similar outdoor forces. But at the same time, I needed to start socializing and taming Godzilla out at this age, like I would any other pet, because once these crocs get to their full size of about 5 feet, they become dangerous and difficult to work around if they hadn't learned through their lifetime that humans are friends. So far, the socialization process was going well, and he has now gotten to learn my face, the sound of my voice, and associate my presence with getting food. Good, Godzilla. Rest well now. Looking at his belly, it seems he has done a great job so far at catching all the food he needed from the rainforest. I began to wonder if there were baby sunskinks in there too. I also began to wonder if Godzilla was responsible for Snip's missing tail end. I guess we would find out in time. But meanwhile, little did I know, other unforeseen dangers were brewing, and a mass disaster of sorts was about to happen.
It's actually
that I could have never
so
predicted
cool.
That would affect
This
every
guy's just got
terrestrial creature
Many
in
different
Pandora.
types of mini ecosystems in his house.
It's officially typhoon season in Southeast Asia where I live, and several of these giant rotating storms, equivalent to hurricanes, bringing wind, rain, and destruction every year, come rolling through. During such typhoons, my yard experiences some flooding, and it can rain for days and days on end. The plants and trees in my area love it, and the wildlife are adapted to dealing with such periodic flooding events. But one morning, I woke up to this. No! Off! The new irrigation system connected directly to my water pipes, coming from a well that I had recently installed since the construction of Arcadia, so I could sync their rain schedules, malfunctioned. And I learned later from a technician that the timer had broken, which caused it to rain for hours in Pandora, resulting in about 80% of the soil area submerged underwater. I
He has a
suspect that
cat!
the typhoon still raging outside must have caused a power outage sometime in the early morning and somehow impacted the timer of the irrigation system. Whatever the case, I could see some creatures were already underwater and drowning. Godzilla was sleeping soundly underwater during this whole fiasco, unfazed. But I completely freaked out. I quickly dug a hole down to the pebbly drainage layer and used a shop vac to suck out all the water I could. I was just afraid the roots of the plants, as well as any trapped creatures below the soil, would die. But at the same time, my biologist brain had hope that our rainforest creatures had their various ways to deal with flooding. There were ants, millions of soil creatures, and of course our Macrotermes termite royals, all raising colonies underground. It took a couple hours to suck out the water until it dropped below the drainage level line. But the big question now was, what had survived? I looked closely into the wet and muddy soils, and to my surprise, indeed, there was life. Lots and lots of life.
Flooding is usually part of these guys' ecosystems, and I don't know what floods would usually bring to the soil and whatnot. I don't actually know.
Springtails and mites could be seen crawling all around the surface of the soil. This was all wonderful to see. A flat-backed millipede had emerged and was crawling across the soil surface. Carpenter ants were going about their usual business, collecting food from the vine air roots. I spotted a snail that had grabbed onto one of the vine roots and was using it to climb to safety. Other snails were simply crawling up the glass, as were many other creatures like springtails, and these gross creatures. Land planaria. These planarians are a type of predatory flatworm that eats small creatures. Their slimy body allowed it to stick to the glass as it crawled upwards away from the flood. You could see the creature's two little black eyes and its creepy-looking front end, which was shaped like an elongated head of a fountain pen, kept elevated from the glass, feeling its way around as it moved. Ugh. The thing gives me true shivers. But these land planarians have become a permanent fixture in our rainforest and do have their purpose in the ecosystem as predators to tiny insects. I watched it stop to think about whether it should head back down. So gross. Also emerging was this cute fellow. It was a tiny frog, just under an inch long. I hadn't seen this frog in such a long time, since it randomly appeared in our rainforest in the season finale episode of Season 1. I assumed it had been introduced by way of the plants upon construction. It was just amazing to me that creatures like this frog can live on the DL in our rainforest and go completely unspotted for months. I suppose the flood had brought it out of hiding, which tends to happen with many terrestrial and burrowing frog species. It looked unhappy to be awake though, and decided to crawl into an upper pot where it knew it would be drier. Now I didn't know it at the time, but this wasn't the only surprise amphibian I'd be spotting this week. An interesting appearance or two was soon to come. Earthworms had also begun to make the climb up towards dry land, like this earthworm here, seen crawling among the dwarf ants, who live
that's
inside
right.
the stump.
Certain rains
Some
make
earthworms were
earthworms
heading back down towards
surface,
the ground to return to
which
the soil.
some
It
animals
was
take
then
advantage
that I
of.
spotted this particular creature making its way through the tunnels within the soil. What is that? It was whitish in color and elongated, possessing multiple appendages. To me, it looked predatory, kind of like a short centipede or something. My guess was it was some kind of predatory beetle larva, perhaps. Any ideas what species this thing might be? It looked menacing. But I think I was most happy to see that these guys were still alive, post-flood. Our gnome ants were crawling along the surface of the soil, completely focused on collecting the plethora of little edible debris and small drowned insects washed up from within the soils by the flood. I was afraid that these gnome ants might have died in the flood, seeing as these ants nest directly in the soils. But it looks to me like they totally had things under control. They're currently running a monopoly, as far as ants go, in Pandoran soils, with workers completely sweeping the surface thoroughly of anything they can eat. But for the first time, I spotted something pretty amazing. There! See it? It's a major. So I still don't know what species these gnome ants are, and they look to me like smaller fire ants. And now that I see that they're polymorphic, i.e. having these larger majors with specialized massive heads for cutting things open, they really reminded me of fire ants.
It's really
Outta here,
interesting
Hexapod,
seeing.
a worker barked. Looks like they had a bit of an
Really
attitude
interesting to
too,
me how
like
certain
fire
ants can just
Anyone
have
know what
many
species these ants
different
might be? I think it's time we give these
forms,
nomads
I guess,
a name,
so to
as
speak.
they've proven they could stand the test of time in our forest. Please leave your name suggestions for the nomads.
That old
in the
worker ant's
comments.
female.
But now that I knew
Fun
the
fact.
ants were okay, my next question now was, were the Macrotermes termite royals okay? I was counting on them to create colonies so I could grow my termite mushrooms in the vivarium. I suspected the termites were adapted to flooding, just like all the other creatures, and that they knew how to deal with flooding of their underground chambers. But I wasn't completely sure. But as I looked around, I noticed this. Yay! The termite royals were alive! And you know how I could tell? See that bulge in the soil? That is a signature termite mound, a baby one. And it was very close to the spot where I had watched a trio of Macrotermes termite royals dig their chamber. To me, this meant the termites had already constructed at least part of their chamber here at higher ground, safe from the flood. This was awesome news, because I was ready for the next step of my shroom growing operation. The next day, when the typhoon had finally passed, Mother Nature did her great work and began to set in motion the mass welcoming of termite mushrooms. All along the streets of my area, vendors were selling loads of freshly collected termite mushrooms that had sprouted from termite mounds in the forest. I rejoiced because this only meant one thing. The first generation of Macrotermes termite workers, born from the royals of the nuptial flight several weeks back, were arriving. Mother Nature has perfectly timed the Termitomyces mushroom season with the arrival of the workers, because the propagation process is truly a natural wonder. So get this.
It's so cool.
What happens is, once the termite royals create their underground chambers, they raise the first termite workers completely off a self-made nutritious soup regurgitated by the kings and queens that raised them. And when the workers reach the adult stage, they are ready to burrow outside of the nest for the first time to forage for something very important to the survival of the colony.
But this
They
isn't
must
creeping anyone
collect
out.
and eat decaying leaves and wood fibers that contain spores from the Termitomyces mushrooms. And due to nature's perfect timing, this key termite foraging period is also when the mushrooms sprout, triggered by the thunderstorms of rainy season. So once the mushrooms sprout, they release the spores that are carried by winds to cover vast areas where they land on wood and leaf debris. The termites eat this debris, and inside their guts, special microbes and enzymes take over, and the resulting poop is laid out in a cool structure on which sprouts the beginning of the fungus. And so I was giddy and bought a ton of the Termitomyces mushrooms from the vendors. I've laid out some of them here. You can see that there are two species of Termitomyces shrooms, a larger and a smaller species. There are several possible species that can grow from a termite nest, but within the nest, multiple species of the Termitomyces can start to grow, but they eventually start to compete with each other, until one becomes the dominant species raised by the given termite colony. I made sure to buy two species, and began to lay them out along the forest floor of Pandora. Godzilla was watching curiously from the mossy hill. What on earth is he doing? He thought. Some shrooms I left hanging onto plants. Based on last year's experimental trials, I learned that these shrooms should be releasing their spores within a few hours. I went up to Arcadia and collected leaf litter and debris and mixed them all in with the shrooms.
I wonder how
For
much
good
he
measure,
studied
I also went
to
out and collected a
even
ton
make
of
these
leaf
small
litter and scattered
ecosystems.
it along the forest floor. They probably may have already contained the spores from outside termite mushrooms, but I placed a bunch of shrooms on top of them to make sure a ton more spores would cover them. I also placed some of the shrooms into caverns of the driftwood, so spores would also fall into their outer fibers. And then, all was complete. Soon these mushrooms would release their spores to cover all this decaying plant material and wood, awaiting for the first termite workers to come along and eat the debris to start the fungus combs within their nests. What's incredible is that the fungus and the termites have a symbiotic relationship where one cannot live without the other in nature, and their life cycles are completely dependent on each other's success. I didn't know how long it would be before we could spot the foraging Macrotermes termites above ground, looking to eat the spore-laden debris. But regardless, I was prepared to succeed this year in growing these mushrooms. Little did I know, I would soon be celebrating on our mushroom growing journey. The mists blew through the lands, bringing a wave of humidity to the rainforest.
It's like, what is
This
it?
was awesome, as it would stimulate the mushrooms
We've
to release
had
their spores
attempts to
even
make
quicker.
man-made honey.
There was always something so mystical about the mists that blew through the rainforest, twice.
And I
within a
don't remember
24-hour
what we
period,
ended up
And
with.
it was ultra relaxing to watch.
But there's always something missing whenever we try to make it man-made. And I feel like these are still fields of research which I think are actually...
The mist was also rising up through the glass bridge to
Mm,
bring
I wouldn't say
humidity to
important,
Arcadia
but really
above.
cool and interesting. Like, trying to figure out how to farm something that needs an insect in part of its growth cycle. If you can isolate what makes it grow, figure it out, you could probably mass produce
when the mists
this.
arrive, certain creatures come out of hiding to enjoy the humidified air. Spiders, particularly huntsmen, come out of hiding. Here's a juvenile, and back there is another. Here's another. Its abdomen was tickled by the webbing from another tiny spider there. Hi there, oh teenage huntsman. I also spotted another tiny spider close to it. The spiders seemed to be having a party. This tiny spider had captured a dwarf ant elate. I watched as the huntsman teenager began cleaning
I'm
its
so
legs.
sorry to anyone that's scared of spiders. Look away.
It then proceeded to clean its genitalia. Then more leg cleaning. All creatures of the rainforest need to be diligent at keeping as clean as possible, because in such a hot and humid environment, it's easy for bacterial or fungal infection to completely take over. Cleanliness is a sine qua non for Pandoran living. Speaking of fungus
small
and the
creatures
of
can keep
Pandora,
themselves
I
clean,
already started to
why
notice
can't
the animals
Congos just take a
emerging
fucking shower?
to take advantage of the new shroom buffet available to them. The gnome ants
Ah.
excitedly rushed back to their nest, carrying pieces they had picked off the shrooms. How I loved watching their trails snake through the lands on a major collection operation. The ants particularly loved the gills, where the spores come from. It comes to show you how tasty these mushrooms are, that they're loved by humans, the termites, and ants. Eventually, the rains came, followed by the winds, which would help further distribute the spores. And lo and behold, I was about to make the coolest discovery by night. Night fell in Pandora, and the rainforest's night creatures had come out to play. The roaches were now taking their turn at munching down on the shrooms. The gnome ants were still active as ever, collecting bits of shrooms to store in their nest to feed on. And as I looked closer at the shrooms, I rejoiced when I saw the awesome white powder coating the leaf litter below the gills. See it? The spores were now releasing from the mushrooms. The plan was working. Yay! You know, I find that when caring for nature, there are often certain moments where I'm just left in sheer awe at watching Mother Nature just do her thing. And to think that something as simple as some spores spilling out of a mushroom cap, which to most people would be the most boring event in the universe, to us, who understand how critical such an event is for both the Termitomyces mushroom species and the termites that have been farming them for millions of years, is truly just a miracle to witness. And it was exciting
I
to know
hope he
that
actually
somewhere below the
ends
soils
up
of
being able
Pandora
to
were chambers full of termite workers
keep them alive.
waiting to burst forth up to the surface to eat the spore-covered debris.
Because he's had them
so they could start
isolated.
building their fungus combs made from their poop. I
So
couldn't
just the
wait for
termites and the
day this would
mushrooms, and he
happen.
has failed. He failed
But
to make
guys,
them
you won't believe
survive.
what I saw the next morning. By morning, I spotted some isopods of various colors, just devouring some of the new debris and leaf litter. Isopods are some of the forest's most efficient detritivores, breaking down organic material back into the soils. I wondered though, what if the isopods were so thorough that they consumed all the debris and leaf litter, which was supposed to be fuel for the termites' fungal gardens? I began to wonder if the spores could survive passing through the digestive systems of detritivores like isopods. Maybe the spores somehow benefit from passing through the digestive systems of certain detritivores, where it can be digested by the termites afterward.
Never heard that
My previous attempts to get Termitomyces
phrase
growing
before.
failed.
The tritivore.
And it could be that I was missing certain players in the process. It was something worth researching, since there is still so much we don't know about the Termitomyces process. Most of the mushrooms had been reduced to circles of slime in the leaf litter all around the forest floor. It didn't take very long for these mushrooms to decay and become food to other creatures. But as I began to scan the soils for mushroom remains, what I spotted next was the best sight I could possibly behold. Termites. What? No way! Yes way! Huge, healthy termite workers, foraging for you-know-what? The good stuff. Spore-flavored detritus, which was all ready for the termites to consume. These workers now had to do their best to select the right decaying plant material to eat. I don't know if they could smell which material had spores on them, but to be honest, I'm sure the tiny invisible spores had covered all exposed surfaces of the vivarium by now, that no matter what they ate, they'd be ingesting it. It was totally insane to watch this termite worker foraging above ground during the day, despite predators like Snip lurking around. It was hyper-focused on one important job right now, a job that would mean survival for its colony. And of course I cheered the termites on, because one day, if all goes well, and the termites succeed at getting their fungus combs growing underground, and hopefully unlike my past year's
Of
attempts,
all the ways to
manage
try
keep the
and
fungus
cultivate
combs
the
alive
mushrooms,
using
I
resources
feel like
and
taking a
conditions
slice of the
our
ecosystem is
rainforest,
kind of cheating.
We'll one day be spotting a huge termite mound growing in Pandora. And maybe, just maybe, at the next rainy season, Termitomyces mushrooms would be sprouting in Pandora, and we would have therefore achieved something truly huge.
Anyone else feel that way?
And in my mind, eating that first Termitomyces mushroom we grew indoors, I mean, the termites grew indoors, would be the ultimate shroom trip of a lifetime.
Although at that point, it's kind of like, yeah, you managed to bring it indoors, but you kind of took an entire ecosystem.
Besides mushrooms and termites, I was surprised to discover that the typhoon that had passed had caused other life forms to wake up from their long underground slumbers. In my home, I have several houseplants, all of which came from outdoor nurseries. And just like in Pandora, I began to spot some totally amazing creatures that were introduced into my home by way of the plants that I just couldn't wait to add into our rainforest. AC family, I'm pleased to present to you Beyonce and Jay-Z.
This channel is so fucking interesting. There's so fucking many cool things. He started with just ant colonies, I'm pretty sure. And at some point, he's just... Yeah, I'm just taking care of entire fucking ecosystems now. The natural progression is you'd be like, hey guys, this is my backyard, and his backyard's just the entire planet. He has now become the caretaker of the planet. Natural progression of things. Anyway, I'm gonna cut stream short. Cause I'm not feeling great. And I'm gonna go lay back down. Allergies are making me really tired and really hungry. But currently tired is winning out. So thank you for hanging out. I feel bad having such short streams, but they'll be long again. Once I allergies, you know, calm down and don't completely destroy me. Either way. Good night, goodbye, good morning, whichever it is. I'll see you guys next time.